Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about AMD, which as we can see over the last year is not outperforming the market at all. It's down about 49%, almost 50% compared to the S&P 500, which is only down about 15% in comparison. So not really that good of a year for AMD. And so in this video, I'm just going to look into the third quarter earnings results for AMD to try to figure out some of the potential growth that's projected for the company into the future. And then I'm also going to figure out the intrinsic value per share for AMD so we can know if this is a good buying price to buy into the stock from a value investing perspective, from a long-term investment perspective. Because obviously, if the stock has fallen this much, then it's possible that it could present a really strong buying opportunity at the moment. But before that, I wanted to look at this article that I found called AMD is on the rise despite missing earnings. And there are a couple of interesting things that this article pointed out. The first one here, under this subtitle, AMD's Earnings Conundrum, we can see right here that one of the biggest things that AMD recently did was they acquired a new company called Xilinx, I think that's pronounced. I'm not completely sure. But when they did this, their share count increased by 34% to over 1.6 billion. And so obviously, that's going to have a negative impact on their earnings per share, and it might also dilute some of their previous shareholders since they're adding new partners by issuing that many new shares. Also, if we scroll down here, we can see that the CEO blames some of their slowing PC sales on the fact that the industry as a whole is slowing down, including one of their main competitors, Intel, which also reported a similar decline in their third quarter earnings report. On top of that, the lockdowns in China are also putting further pressure on AMD's revenues. And then lastly, we can see right here, this part of the article tries to make an interesting point where they point out that when the lockdown measures went into place, a lot of customers had to buy PCs because a lot of work shifted from face-to-face to remote, and so they had to buy PCs to work from home. But considering the fact that both these workers are returning to office now and the fact that PCs, obviously, you don't have to really buy new PCs that often. They're products that last for a pretty long time. We can see this article talks about how they last for up to 10 years, basically. So the market for PCs might remain sluggish for years to come because it's sort of a product where you buy it once and then you're good to go. So for those reasons, obviously, those are a lot of reasons why AMD might be down quite a bit over the last year. And so right here, we can see their income statement, and they're comparing their income statement for the 3 months of the third quarter of 2022 and 2021. And we can see that during that time period, their net revenues increased from about $4.3 billion to about $5.5 billion. So that's an increase of about 29% year over year for their revenues. Their gross profit also increased, though not at as impressive of a margin. It increased by about 13% from about $2 billion to $2.3 billion. And then we can see if I scroll down here, something interesting right here in their operating activities is that their operating expenses increased quite a bit by about 113% year over year. And that came mainly as a result of this one-time amortization expense for the acquisition of the intangible assets from that company that they acquired. And as a result of this large intangible amortization expense, we can see that their net income for the year actually decreased year over year from $923 million to only $66 million. So that's a decrease of about 93% year over year for AMD's net income. But it's mainly as a result of this amortization of intangible assets as a result of the acquisition of this new company that they acquired. And so right here on page 5, we can see they're comparing their balance sheets, their statement of financial position for September 24th, 2022 to December 25th, 2021. And during that time period, their total assets have increased from about $12.4 billion to $67.8 billion. Obviously, right here, we can see acquisition-related intangibles that coupled with the goodwill on their balance sheet as a result of the acquisition is mainly what contributed to this increase in their total assets. And on top of that, as we saw in the article, AMD had to finance this acquisition by issuing new shares. And so as a result, their total stockholders' equity increased from about $7.4 billion to about $54.5 billion. And that's mainly as a result, as we can see right here, of additional paid-in capital from issuing new shares in order to finance the acquisition. Lastly, we can see their cash flow statement for the 9 months of 2022 compared to 2021, first 9 months. We can see that their operating cash flow actually increased from about $2.6 billion to about $2.9 billion. And then we can also see that in their financing activities, they've repurchased quite a bit of common stock in the first 9 months of 2022. They've repurchased about $3.4 billion. So they're trying to return as much value as possible back to their shareholders. And we can actually see that the $3.4 billion worth of common stock repurchased is more than their operating cash flow for the first 9 months of 2022. So that means that they've obviously been pulling on like retained earnings from prior periods in order to repurchase some of the common stock to try to boost their share price here. And so now we can see right here, this is my discounted cash flow model for AMD to try to figure out what the intrinsic value per share of their company is. And we can see that over the next 5 years, it's expected by analysts from Yahoo Finance that AMD is going to grow at about 16% compounded annually for the next 5 years. So I was conservative and I cut that value in half to about 8% for the next 5 years after that. They have about $3 billion worth of free cash flow in 2021. They have about $2.7 billion worth of cash on their balance sheet after subtracting the amount of debt they have. And they have about 1.6 billion shares outstanding. And so with these metrics in mind, we can see that the intrinsic value per share is estimated to be around $44 per share, which means that although AMD stock has fallen by about 50% over the last year, looks like Yahoo Finance is estimating that they're still trading above their intrinsic value per share by a pretty substantial margin here. They're trading at $73 per share when the intrinsic value per share based on an 8 to 16% growth rate over the next decade or so is calculated around to be about $44 per share. And so if I scroll to the right here, we can see I did a competitor analysis comparing them to some of their competitors in this industry for computers and chips. And we can see that I'm comparing them to Intel and NVIDIA. And by and large, in comparison to their competitors, looks like AMD is not doing that well, especially in terms of profit margin. They have the lowest gross profit margin and net profit margin, NVIDIA having the highest, but they do have the highest return on assets. So they are leveraging their assets the best out of the three companies in order to get a return on their business. So that's a good sign. But from this analytical perspective, I would personally say that I probably wouldn't buy into AMD from a competitor analysis point of view. I'd probably choose NVIDIA just because they obviously have the superior profit margins and the return on assets is still pretty competitive. But then if we looked at the intrinsic value analysis here, we can see AMD looks like they're trading above their intrinsic value per share of $44 at the moment, since they're trading at $73 per share. And obviously with that one-time acquisition cost of the one-time amortization cost from acquiring that one company that they recently acquired, it looks like AMD might be struggling to, I don't know, keep up their net income growth year over year. We're not going to really know how this new acquired company is going to contribute to an increase in AMD's profits in the future. So only time will tell to see if that ends up being a positive for AMD's company. So I'm not too sure at the moment what to think of AMD. I probably wouldn't buy into it at this share price for me personally. But I would love to know what anyone watching this video thinks about AMD. Is it a good buying price at this share price? Let me know what your opinions are in the comment section down below. And let me know if you guys own any shares of AMD. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, and I'll see everyone in the next one.